Welcome to the OnScript podcast, your home for world-class conversations on scripture and theology, where you get to meet some of the best in the field. Visit us at onscript.study. Say hello on Twitter at OnScriptPodcast and stop by our Facebook page at facebook.com/onscript.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the OnScript podcast. This is Matt Lynch coming to you from the UK, and I am a co-host of the podcast along with Matt Bates, Drew Johnson, Aaron Heim, Chris Tilling, and Amy Brown Hughes. And I'll get right to the point here. We've got a very special episode for you. Backed by popular demand is Professor Ervine Sheblatzm, who is coming to talk to us about the interface of faith and science. And he has a very unique perspective on both of those topics, and we had a very engaging conversation. If you haven't listened to our episode from last year, you can go back through our archives and hear about his previous book he wrote, but he's got a new book that we're discussing in this episode. So I hope you enjoy it, and send any feedback to us at onscriptpodcast@gmail.com. That's onscriptpodcast@gmail.com, and we'd love to hear from you. Thanks for listening. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to OnScript. Our guest today, back on the show for a second time, is Professor Ervine Sheblatzm. According to his website, Professor Sheblatzm holds doctorates in physics and theology from recognized institutions and has won awards of various sorts. He runs a research facility in the Lake District in the UK with his friend Dave, and carries out extensive research online as well. His primary areas of research include multiverse theory, the letters of Paul, and he also conducts research in paleoarchaeology, cosmology, and metaphorism. He lists life coaching and people watching among his various hobbies on his website. And he's the author of Paul, Multiverse Theory, and the Journey of the Inner Soul, which we discussed in our last episode. And most recently, Faultlines in the Horizon, Paul's Dawning Age Marches On, published this year. Ervine, welcome to OnScript.
Welcome back.
Okay, before we went on air here, you mentioned that since our last episode, you've been on quite an intellectual journey in which you've made some pretty exciting discoveries. But before we get into those, could you help our listeners who aren't familiar with your work just understand what it is that you do?
My pleasure. Absolutely, Matthew. I think, for me, this is part 2 of our journey together. I think part 1 was interesting, Yep. So part 2, here we go. How do you sum it up? Okay. I exist. I produce. I share. I give myself to my work. That's what I do.
Okay.
I think that's clear.
Yeah, I think you're really able to crystallize things a little bit, but let me just jump in on one of those terms. What is it that you produce?
Works. I think.
Okay. Yeah.
Sorry.
I guess we'll get.
Sorry. My apologies. I sensed I wasn't maybe clear with that. I'm trying to move to a place when I communicate of just being concise, just taking my knowledge.
Yeah.
Like the earth does to gold, make it into a nugget, and freely pass that nugget out. So I must be clear. Your listeners are a mix of people, some intellects out there. So. I'm happy to expand wherever necessary. If I give a nugget and you feel, do you know what, I've caught that nugget, I'm going to slip it in my pocket, that's fine. If you want me to expand on stuff, I'm happy. So what was your question?
What is it that you produce?
What does I produce? So I said works. And what I meant by that was, I'm trying to build an anthology of knowledge is my goal, my long-term goal. And I think... I like the term...
Slightly ambitious.
Yeah. Well, Matthew, are you not ambitious? What are you going to do? Write one book and give up? You got to be. I mean, when Shakespeare started, he ends up with the works of Shakespeare, not the thoughts of Shakespeare or the scribbles of Shakespeare. It's the works of Shakespeare. So why set yourself low? Why be like the pamphlet of Sheblatzm? Like I aim for Sheblatzmisms. So one day, probably when I'm gone, someone's sitting somewhere, or someone, spreading knowledge out themselves, thinks to themselves, let me give you a Sheblatzism.
Yeah. Well,
know?
I mean, I guess those things are determined by the quality of what you produce, whether those things catch on or not, right?
Yeah, but I think you're right. On this one, I'll agree with you. But I think there's also, why not plant the seed? Why not just pop that seed in someone's mind?
Seed of what?
Well, the seed of the concept that these are works. They may not be works right now, but one day they will be.
Mm-hmm. Well, you've got two books out, and maybe, yeah, go ahead.
No, it's just an example popped in my head. Alexander the Great.
Okay.
Surely when he named himself Alexander the Great, he thought, start now. He could have been like...
Did he name himself that?
Well, surely he did. Who else in history is going to... It's not. You don't get like Napoleon the Great. He chose Napoleon. So I don't think people after you've died look back on what you've done and then add extra titles. I would say he thought, I need maybe it's his stage name. Maybe Alexander the Great was Alex to his mates, but Alexander the Great was what he went with. And I think that's what you do. You plant the seed early.
Yeah, with his soldiers, he's like, call me great, right?
Yeah, good one.
Yeah, thanks. So you explained to me earlier that your research facility in the Lake District has been expanding rapidly in the last year. So do you want to tell me about some of the developments there? Because just for our listeners' sake, you work in science and theology and the kind of interface between those two.
And I know in the previous podcast that gained some attention. So let me cover some of the stuff I've been working on and some of the stuff that some of your, I assume everybody returning listen to the first one. So
I mean, if not, they can go back and find that in the podcast
feed.
Course,
of course. Melons. Hospital. No melons. Okay? So that did gain some attention, and I felt I'm going to be honest. Honesty is key, Matt. Truth and honesty are like a couple holding hands. Okay. It's like a couple in a positive, good relationship holding hands. And the melon thing was good, but originally, to backtrack, theory on the internet I discovered have half a melon a day every morning. It infuses your brain to work hard and stuff like that. So I decided to eat half a melon for every meal because I wanted to not only enthuse my mind to be better, but to go better. Anyway, seemingly you can have too much fruit in your diet, and what happened then was I had to go to hospital and I was poorly, so I've cut melon out. So I've and you'll see a theme today as we discuss where my research and my scholarly journey is heading, and I'm engaging with culture. I feel like some scholars are rejecting culture, or they're standing away from culture. I say to not only do I embrace culture, I embrace it and I tackle it to the ground. So I'm looking at cultural trends, and one at the moment is veganism. There's very good reasons for picking veganism. Yeah. So I've moved from the melon, the fruitization, whatever the word is, and then I've gone for a vegan. It's for me. This derives from Paul's love of ecology. Yeah. And I think that's not an area I'm studying at the moment, but I have flirted with that area of scholarly work. So So at the moment, all I can do is just apply myself to my veganism. Yeah, so I've decided to take a journey through veganism. Paul's love of ecology, is a topical thing that's being discussed at the moment, and I haven't had time yet to really explore it. I've flirted with it, and I kind of get where people are going with it. So I thought I'll pull what I can. I've pulled a couple of aspects of that.
And just for our listeners who may not be familiar with some of the key ways that Paul engages with that theory, what are some of the kind of go-to texts for you in thinking about Paul and ecology?
Well, right, I think, and you've probably done this. There's only so many hours in the day, so sometimes you have to lend out your belief in a theory to someone else. So I've just seen it bouncing around, this idea that Paul was in love with ecology, and so I'm sort of taking steps myself to embrace that. I do feel there's, and dare I say it, another chapter of the works to come with but maybe that's for the next time I'm on.
Yeah, but I mean, if you're going there now in your work, shouldn't you do the kind of homework and the grounding first, or?
Where Paul intersects with modern culture. It's trendy to be a vegan. It's trendy to be this now. Yeah. I just think for now, let's go with it. What's the worst going to happen?
Well, I mean, it could be a trend that is harmful or potentially wrong-headed or something like that. I mean, I see.
Right.
I'm not saying those two areas because I actually think they're good directions for research to go, depending on what exactly you mean. And I'm not quite clear yet on where. Yeah.
I feel like we're kind of hashing old ground a little bit. We did cover a little bit of this in the last podcast, where it's not always easy or straightforward to lock fully onto and sort out your full understanding of a theory. I think there's a and I'm always come up with new paradigms around how you do research, how you engage with complex theories. And I think, again, for me, this one's just one of those ones I'm going to okay, what it's like me planting a seed in a bowl of soil. It's going to grow. So right now, Paul, ecology, how I can be like Paul through ecology. Yeah. It's just that little seed growing.
Yeah, you're planting seeds again.
Planting seeds again everywhere.
Okay, so back to veganism.
Sorry, it's just last thing about veganism. It's again, it's veganism, but I'm having to include meat because after the hospital visit, my doctor told me I had to do certain things. But what I'm not doing is I don't want to lose that.
I mean, how can it be veganism with meat?
You're not the first person. When I told Dave about this, he laughed. But bear with me. I'm concentrating.
And Dave is...
Oh, sorry. For those who don't know, previous podcast, Dave is my intellectual sparring partner. He comes around the house and helps me with my research. So I've got to have the meat. But what I've done is I'm engaging my body and my mind through the vegetables, and when the meat has to pass into my body, I'm just letting it go, not paying much attention. Boom, in, gone. So that's how I'm sort of maintaining a vegan approach, but having to have a balanced diet. So that's where we are. And we don't want to spend the whole.
I don't think you'll convince vegans out there that that's true veganism.
No, but
I get your point,
Matt. You were going to return to the same point again. There are so many times where someone was leading the way, like Einstein, and they laughed at him. And people can mock, and then 10 years, 20 years later, it'll be the latest thing.
But aren't there also a lot of ideas that people ridicule and critique because they're wrong?
But what is wrong? Truth in the postmodernistic world, truth is in the eye of the beholder.
Well, not entirely.
And I think there's a lot to say for that.
Yeah, it depends on what theory of truth you're working with. Like, if truth corresponds to some reality external to yourself, then no, that's not the case.
No, absolutely. Last time we spoke, we had a little discussion after the podcast, and I know you gave me some really positive things to think about, but the way I was doing some of my works and stuff. But sometimes you've got to just go with your gut.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, speaking of veganism, all right. So. You back to my question, which I posed earlier about like the rapidly expanding research facility that you talked about. What are some of those developments? And I want to get to the theology stuff, but I want people to understand the science you're doing too.
So I was looking at the interpersonal relationships that my cats had. I was using them as a small experiment in my research center, and I had a bit of a problem. A lot of science actually I found out they use rats. They don't rats or monkeys, but monkeys are really expensive. So rats are much cheaper. And I said to Dave, "Could you get me some rats?" And I then panicked and thought he's just going to go and trap a rat or something. We're in a rural area, so I thought I need a rat that's going to know what to do, because there are actually, I don't know whether you knew this, Matt, there are rats they breed to work in labs.
Oh, interesting.
Lab rats. So I said, anyway, long story short, I had my cats, and it's quite sad actually, and they left me.
What?
They
ran away?
Well, I would say not that. I've spoken to my counsellor several times about this. I used the word abandoned. She advises me to say left, so I've got to say left. They left me. What happened?
So did they run away from the facility, or
I got a mea culpa? I got to be clear and be honest with the audience. I bought 1,000 lab rats by accident off the internet, and I felt with the Pauline ecology stuff, I just didn't think I could not get rid of them or send them back, so I kept them. Anyway, 1,000 rats don't mix well with cats, and so the cats left. I tried to work with the rats.
Sorry to hear that.
Yeah,
Sounds
it's a bit
awful.
of I don't really want to talk about it, to be honest. I wanted to work with the rats. That didn't really work out either. So now I just have a... Anyway, let's move on. So one of the big changes is, you know how much I enjoyed my cats.
Yeah.
How much they contribute to my work. Where do you turn in the... When you have cats, you accidentally buy 1,000 rats.
Yeah.
Your cats abandon you. Where do you turn, Matt?
Yeah.
The Bible. Right? Straight in. At the start of the Bible. Genesis.
Yeah.
Let me read you something. Let me see so you understand where I'm coming from. So the Lord said to him, "Bring me a heifer, a goat, and a ram, each 3 years old, along with a dove and a young pigeon." I read those words, and they say they jumped.
So
off the
where are
page.
you reading from there?
Genesis.
What's the reference?
It's about 10 pages in. It was on one of the pages. So
Okay.
now a heifer is a cow. I don't really know this, but it's a cow. And my garden's not very big, so I can't do a cow. Now a ram seemed a bit dangerous to me, so I didn't do a ram. And the birds are going to fly away. Let's be obvious. What's that leaving with?
The goat. Yeah.
Now, so I have
Well,
breaking news. I now have a goat, and I've called her Paul. So, this is now my new goats. So I have a goat now, and for me, this is a direct biblical connection. One thing that the Bible has constantly is goats, because you think back at the Genesis, there were goats. Roll on time, Exodus, they had goats. Everyone has goats. Goats here, Israelites, goats, tribes, goats. So I thought, when I connect with my goat, I'm connecting with a biblical experience. So some people meditate. I milk. When I milk that goat, I just feel connected to the biblical history. It's like pun. It's a living bit of the Bible. So so me and Paul will go out to the garden. We'll have a good milking session, and it's just making me well up actually. And I'll things will pop. The things that pop into your head when you're milking are really sometimes special for me, and I don't know what it is. Maybe it's the biblical connection. I don't know. So and you get milk, so it's a win-win. So do you know what? Then let me tell you a funny story. So one of the things I was toying with, a lot of the great, particularly in art, a lot of famous artists had a muse. So Dave volunteered to be my muse, and I didn't think that was appropriate, so I moved on. And spending time with Paul. Well, yeah, I'd read about people, like Picasso had Dora Maar, Lennon had Yoko Ono, Edward Manet had Victoria Miret in his pictures, and for me it's Paul the goat. It just happened. I didn't plan it. I was,
So Paul is your muse,
Yeah.
as you think about Paul the biblical
yeah,
writer. Okay.
yeah, can't explain it. Anyway, that's where we're at. So that's where the research,
Yeah. So your book is entitled Faultlines in the Horizon,
Yep.
Paul's Dawning Age Marches On. What exactly, let's start with the first part of that title. What exactly do you mean by faultlines in the horizon?
The thing I can say to that is, let me just say this. Vos autem coram omnem subinterferetes ministrate in fide vestra vitrium in virtue utum scientium.
Okay, so that was a Latin phrase of some sort. I'm not.
Well done. Are you a Latinist like me?
No, I'm not.
Okay, well, for you and for your un-Latin-speaking listeners, that is, for this very reason, make every effort to add to your faith goodness, and to goodness knowledge.
Okay.
2 Peter 1:5. That was a game changer for me.
Mm-hmm.
Before, I just made an assumption that I should both gain knowledge and share it. But when you read that, it's clear as day.
So what are the fault lines in the horizon?
Oh, okay, yeah. Right, my book. Good question, Matt. Unfortunately, there's a simple answer.
Okay.
Before Paul, let's break this down, okay? So you've got Paul, And that's let's say when Paul was alive doing his great works, Paul time, yeah. Before that, you had Paulus time, and after that, you had post-Paul time. Okay, so that's 3 branches of time. If anyone has read my previous book, 3 is an important number. 3 appears again, just saying. So Paul time, post-Paul period, and the Paulus period. Okay, so before that, before Paul time, in the Paulus time, things were I think things was theologically quite sturdy. When Paul came along, just fault lines everywhere. He's throwing fault lines out like there's no tomorrow. Bush, all over the place.
Bush.
You're
I mean
like
sound
you know,
effect.
that kind of stuff. So I wanted to, with this title, Faultlines in the Horizon, what I thought about, you know, bear with me on this, another slight theory of mine. When you stand on a beach, so let's say you're 5'5" or something, okay? When you look to the horizon, it's like 3 or 4 miles, okay? So I thought a fault line of about 3.5, 4 miles is quite a long fault line, isn't it? But the reason why I said
I'm struggling with the imagery here. So
that's fine.
A fault line is something that, you know, signals like a rupture between two like steady objects or something like that.
Absolutely,
So you've got a 3-mile fault line. I'm not.
Well,
really
no.
clear.
The point. Sorry. I know this is dead simple, but I'll try again. The fault line is almost endless. I don't think it's endless. I think it has an end, but it's like just under endless, if that makes sense. So that what I was trying to say was, and this is key to the title, it says fault lines in the horizon, not up to or just before the horizon. Because it's saying that however high you get, because let's say if you say you're 5'5" and you're on a beach and the horizon's 3 or 4 miles away. If you then get up on a 300-foot cliff, it's only 6 or 7 miles away. So the point is that you can't go so high that you can see the end of the fault line, because the fault line is, Paul's teachings are so rupturous that you just can't get to the end of the fault line.
So, and this is getting to your subtitle, Paul's Dawning Age Marches On.
Yes.
So are you relating this work to some of the recent scholarship on the apocalyptic Paul? And, you know, because you're talking about a big rupture in Paul, the fault lines and so on, that suggests to me, and this is something that kind of came to mind when I was reading your book, is that you're wanting to engage with apocalyptic Paul scholarship in some way.
Yeah. So, I mean, let's backtrack slightly again.
Yeah.
Most people don't know you as a nice or kind person, Matt. Okay? I know the real you. And after your feedback, last podcast, which was really helpful, I really felt I need to be clear, like crystal clear when I'm trying to explain my theories. I always sort of assume, like Einstein's theory of black holes and stuff. They're so hard to understand. But I bet when he explained this to people, they were like, "Yeah, get you, man, on it." So I wanted to try. I want to try and do that. So I want to be clear. Is that clear?
I mean, it's clear that you want to be clear. Yeah.
Great. So, so the apocalyptic Paul, to me, isn't here yet. Okay. So, his fault lines created a dawning age that is still continuing. So the idea of the book is a way of doing an exegesis on the dawning age and how it marches on. So that's the underlying theory, which is clear. And then I'm doing an exegesis on that, which leads us on this journey.
Do you mean like an exegesis of particular passages in Paul that relate to that?
No, because I think that's the old way of doing things. Okay, I'm doing an exegesis on the theory. So other people have left stuff out.
You're positing your own theory and then doing an exegesis on it, or
well, it's not just my own theory. I think you know, it's a theory that's bouncing around. You know, who owns a theory? You know, who puts their name to a theory? You know, I think like theories are just kind of like always changing, aren't they?
Well, I mean, yeah, theories get associated with particular people, but I think I get your point that
I suppose you're right in that sense, but you know what I mean, don't you? I'm being clear on what I mean. So.
Yeah, I mean, again, this is not my area. The science is not my area, but I am a biblical scholar, so I think...
Aren't we all?
No, I mean, not everyone is.
No, I mean like we. Like you and me and the listeners and people you have on and stuff.
Sure. Okay. Now, let me just drill down a little bit, because I think I'm getting at what you're saying, and this is part of the process of, why I host these interviews is to help listeners hear us wrestle through ideas. But so you're talking, there's a slight paradox in the subtitle, Paul's dawning age marching. Like a dawning age is a sort of momentous thing, but that it's marching. So what are you trying to signal in that paradoxical subtitle?
I'm trying to be clear. I think that's the first thing you need to understand is that I'm trying to bring clarity. That's what the focal point is. Mm-hmm. I don't think getting into the detail of why the title isn't the way it is. I think I want people to read this title and go, man, that's what other scholars should take a leaf out of my book in making myself clear. And I don't think explaining it makes it any clearer. So I'm happy to move on. At some point, I'm sure we might touch on one of the core parts of the book, which is how grace intersectionally reaches into science. So I have a lot of grace theory. I'm going to call it grace theory, which is helping me overcome some of these, let's call them orthodox research methods or orthodox thinking around all this kind of stuff. I'm dawning myself, I think, who can declare this, a new age of thinking.
So let me. I wanted to ask about that specifically. So I'm glad you raised it. So one of the things you mentioned in your book is that you're taking your studies of Paul and applying them to the realm of science, and specifically around the idea that Paul talks about the fact that we're no longer under the law but under grace. So that, which I think itself needs unpacking. And then you're taking that and applying it to science. Could you talk about what you're doing there?
Yeah. So you have science, culture, and grace. They, for me, are the three pillars of my understanding of books. My understanding of to understand my book in a simplistic sense, you have, what did I say? Science, then culture. Science, culture, and grace. Then grace. Okay. Yeah. So context is key. Mm-hmm. You know this. You're an Old Testament scholar, and although Old Testament scholars, it's kind of been done to death of the whole Old Testament stuff, and I know, there's still, I'm sure, stuff to be discovered, or whatever. But you have to contextualize the passage. Step one, isn't it? When you went to Old Testament school, they were like, first things first, contextualize your passage. No use talking about Leviticus, not understanding.
Yeah, I can agree with you there. Yeah,
it's not useful, whatever. Mm-hmm. Imagine like a chocolate, and inside is a nut. That's science. Mm-hmm. Around it is a gooey substance. That's grace, and then chocolate is also grace, and then the wrapper is culture. Okay. So I think I've had a few analogies, but that one for me is the one I rest with now because I think it's crystal clear. We are inducted into our understanding of grace as part of the scientific world through the patriarchal and matriarchal social constructs that exist today. That is the fundamental context you have to get your head around.
Okay.
Boom. Once you get your head around that, everything else falls into place. So
I think we're going to have to hurry this along so what I'm trying to get at is, so it seemed like in your book you were arguing that just as Paul was saying we're no longer under the law but under grace, we need to move away from an exclusive reliance on the laws of science and move into the grace of science is the phrase you use. So I'd be curious to know what you mean by the grace of science and how you transfer those theological concepts over to science.
So let's start in Romans, okay? Because this is where the Pauline sort of, what's it called? The Pauline angle comes from. Mm-hmm. Romans 6:14. For sin shall no longer be your master. Mm-hmm. So if you change sin to science, for science no longer will be your master because you're not under the law.
How do you just swap out science for?
Well, I think as long as you're careful. Mm-hmm. Word swapping from biblical text is not that bad. So right, I'll start again. For science shall no longer be your master because you are not under the law, but under grace. Okay? Mm-hmm. So for me, again, you have. I bet you have this struggle when you're doing things. Well, you're doing like PR for books and stuff, Matt.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to give away the main nugget of the book, do you? Because then no one will buy it. You know. So, so what I want to kind of get, I'll give a like a sort of slight nugget, but not
a little bit
nugget.
of gold dust, huh?
Yeah, here you go. Brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
Let me sprinkle some gold dust. I would say now, after a deep exploration of this area, I can say now that I am freely controlled by grace, for that is my new master.
Okay. Yeah.
One of the problems with, particularly potentially for you, Matt, and other people in your field, is it's old stuff you're talking about, and it's hard to relate to. So what I've done is I've reached out into modern culture, and I've decided to try and use a medium that would allow me to reach people, and in a language that I understand. And I've come across something. Now, this is actually a clean playing field, so you might want to think about this as a way of communicating with your audience. I'm going to recommend it as a way of doing it. So. This is a medium with which I think there's space for clarity.
Yeah.
To just be in abundance. You know, just flow clarity. Okay? So, do you want me to just go for it and give you an example of how this communication can work?
Yep, real concisely. That'd be great.
Okay. Well, that's fine, Matt. And I get the concise thing, but I think that sometimes there needs to be space to allow, you know, if you stop a journey halfway through, you're halfway through your journey. You know, did you get that?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So let me just see if I can find. Just give me a minute. I'll just get into, not an actual minute, because you'll tell me off again. Just give me 10 seconds, okay? Paul's dawning age marches on. Some people think that science is a con. The laws of physics are set in stone, but the grace has a place. I think it can atone. The chasm is open. Let's jump right in. We can all do it together. Let's clear up our sin. So what? My goat is my muse. Let's now confuse. People may diss me. Well, they need more grace. I have got something to say. I'm in a race.
Wow.
So what I've done there, Matt, to make things, to bring clarity, is I've used a modern medium of rap, merged with poetry.
Have you tried this on any other audiences?
No. This one was this. So what for me, as part of the greater works of Sheblatzm, as we could call it, maybe. Was that this was going to be a later thing, but I just felt it was the right time to maybe start start, you know, allowing some of it to spread out, because I think it's a way in which I could clarify for you today. Yeah, because I know.
I could see. Yeah, I think that's something worth honing further. Okay. I wanted to ask about a quote in your book on page 212. You write this quote: "The question isn't whether there's a fault line.
Yep.
A fault line has opened. As a culture, we've reached a point of no return. The question now is whether we're willing to jump in." And I must confess that I had images of people jumping into a chasm as it opened on the earth, which I don't think is what you meant. Why do you think we're at this cultural moment, and what is it that you're calling your readers to jump into?
Truth.
Okay. Yeah.
Truth, empowerment, responsibility, devotion, discipleship. Culture is a beast we cannot ride or tame. We have met with the beast to talk to it and convince it to change its ways. I have started this journey. I have 2 books, 200 followers on Twitter. I feel now I'm what some people call an influencer. I'm trying to tame the beast. The cultural beast.
You started that by saying you can't tame the beast, but then you're taming it. Or did I misunderstand that?
Okay. No, that's fine. I think what I was trying to say is, I'm taming the untamable beast.
Right.
Let's just leave it there.
And you said that a number of times in the book, and you were linking it back to Adam when he named the animals.
Yeah, absolutely.
So is this something where you see like our job as humans in the world to tame beasts, or what? I wasn't. What were you getting at in that kind of repeated image of Adam and the animals, and then this call to tame the beast?
Well, when one tames a beast, I think that like Paul. Paul the goat. When he came to me, he was pretty feral, but through love and our milking sessions and our time together, I think he's tamed. And I think that for me was that was the seed again. Returning to our initial discussions, that was the seed to which the flower of understanding has blossomed for me about this beast taming, and it's a direct relevant. You can relate it straight to culture and stuff. Yeah. After my flirtation with Paul and his sort of the works of his love for ecology and how we should all mirror him, I think for me, I took a stand. So that day I read this tweet about how Paul was into ecology. I was like, I am done. So I have a car, and I decided at that point I will no longer serve that beast of transportation.
Okay, so you went.
Car.
You went.
So
you're
I
a
was
biker
like,
now or something?
Say again.
Are you a biker now?
Well, no, because I need to do a lot of driving. So what I've done is I've got rid of my car. I sold it to Dave. Dave bought it, which is good news for me. Ka-ching. But the caveat for me selling it to Dave was that I need access to it whenever I need to. And Dave's going to drive me as well. So that makes that what happens. So that arrangement has enabled me to have a clear conscience.
So how is that being ecologically sensitive?
Well, I don't own a car anymore.
Right.
Boom.
Yeah, but Dave's okay. What? We'll leave that. Okay. Having had this really helpful discussion of your work, and I think your book is something that our audience will appreciate, and I definitely encourage you to go purchase the book on Amazon. But
yes, please.
As I step back and look at all that you've done in your book, what is it that you want your readers to really take away from your book?
What a question, man! What a question! Wow. What if I was to ask you? Box of chocolates.
Okay.
Birthday. The moment you lift that lid, how do you make it? How can I choose? How can you choose so much?
Yeah, sometimes I just take one, and then there are other people.
Fine. Yeah. You forced my hand. What should we take? Okay. Hope.
Yeah. I mean, do you want to elaborate on that, or
I can? I think let's talk about Paul. Why not? Paul, for me, was not the type of disciple to travel around telling people what they should and should not do. I think he simply led a life of what I would call overt spiritual exploration. Not in a geographical sense, not like traveling around endlessly. It's more of an inner body and inner mind sense of exploration. So I think I like Paul, the man, not the goat. I am me, and I'm a giver, Matt, not a taker. So the book is like me. It's a giver. So you need to just close your eyes, open the book, and take what you can see. For me, envelop yourself in the book.
Yeah.
If I had to simplify it for you, to make it again, we'll go back into what we talked about earlier. Let's be clear and let's be simple. Expose, absorb, energize, expel. Next question.
Wow. So after this book, what is it that's next for you in the works of Sheblatzm? Because you mentioned earlier in our conversation that you really want to think in terms of the works of Sheblatzm.
Absolutely.
So this book on the Paul's the dawning horizon marching on is just part 2 of what you've done with the journey of the inner soul in the previous book. So what's next for you?
Well, I think what you've done there is you've kind of jumped the goat. Pardon the phrase. For me, dare I say, okay, don't feel under pressure, but I'm going to make a suggestion here. What's next for myself? Well, this morning, mid-milk, I was, thinking about this afternoon and about what we're going to do and the kind of journey we're going to go on together. Mm-hmm. And I had a bit of an epiphany, Now, Matt, let me throw something out there. Let me just run something up the flagpole and let's see if you salute, okay? Mm-hmm. Close your eyes and picture this. Mm-hmm. Matthew Bates, Matthew Lynch, Drew Johnson, Aaron Heim, Chris Tilling, Amy Brown-Hughes, and Dr. Ervine Sheblatzm.
Right. Yeah.
Dare I say, after the success of the last year's podcast and this year's podcast, mm-hmm. I know we've not finished yet, but I already mm-hmm. sense the success oozing.
Yeah.
And I don't want you to feel pressure. Yeah. I don't answer now because you need to go away and you need to meditate or whatever you do. I milk, whatever you do, you do. Mm-hmm. But, might there be room for a potential extra host for the podcast? That's what I'm saying. Next question. I don't want to. Let's move on. Let's just leave that there.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine to leave that for now. So as you step back and, we've talked about what you want your readers to take from the book and sort of what's next for you, potentially. What kind of advice would you give to young scholars who are trying to break, a lot of our listeners are in their master's studies in theology or doing doctoral work, and they're looking for advice about career advice and also advice about how to become a better scholar. So what's some of the advice that you give to them? So
to sum it into two parts. Part one, I would say the rats for me. Young rats are born into the rats because who knew rats bred quite successfully, let's say. So we have a lot of young rats. So I'm really kind of watching their journey, and they grow. So for me,
and by young rats, just to clarify, you're talking about young scholars, but using the analogy of rats.
Yeah, I mean rats, young scholars. Mm-hmm. It's for me, it's take it or leave it. It works. Okay, let's reinforce what I said before. Let's be clear, okay? Mm-hmm. Incoming Sheblatzm, brace yourselves. Your journey, in my mind, is yours. And you can journey on your journey and make it your journey, whatever type of journey it feels like, as you journey on your journey.
Yeah.
Now that, to me, is a simple nugget you can pop in your pocket to walk away.
A nugget of gold there.
Say again?
A nugget of gold there.
Nugget of gold. To sum it up, to make it as simple and as easy to understand for people to if you just joined us on the podcast, welcome. But here's something to think about and take away: exploration, momentum, stationary, expansionism. A lot of Paul in there. And so just to clarify, when I said stationary, I don't mean like pens and paper. I mean static. Yeah.
Right.
I think I don't need to say much more.
In the spirit of being clear, are those 4 words what you say? You would just say them to young scholars and to have them think about? Is that the idea?
To me, it's almost a test, isn't it? If you don't get that, I just give up.
Excellent. Well, I think that's a great place to leave our audience and give them something to think about. There's been
I think mission accomplished.
Yeah. I think so in many ways. So I think I want to just say thank you so much for coming back on the podcast.
My pleasure, as always. See you next year or sooner.
Okay. Hey? Yeah. Well, we'll see. Thanks so much.
No worries.
Hey everyone, we hope you really enjoyed this episode, and from the bottom of our hearts, we want to wish you a very happy April Fool's Day.
You've been listening to On Script, delectable conversations on scripture and theology. If this episode has brought you inner peace or lit your biblical fire, please consider a small donation of just $2 or $5 per month. Information on how to donate can be found at onscript.study/donate.